Okay. Hello, guys. My neck. I'm gonna be saying MoistCr1tikal 2,000 times. Which is 1,000 more than I did last time, so slowly climbing. I also wanted to check if, because I've added the chats bot, not a bot, but chat box. Not sure if that's working. Let me see, let me type something. Thug shaker? What does that mean? Okay, it doesn't seem to work. Okay, let me check. I'll wait a bit for some people to show up. Okay, let me try to fix this chat thing. Okay, I'll just put it on default dark. Okay, let's see. It should work, but it doesn't. It doesn't work. Oh wait. Hold up. Okay, this is weird. Yeah, I can see it here, but it doesn't show up there. Duck shaker hunter, either one. I don't know what that means, man. I have no idea. Okay, so it's like weird. Jesus. If I put it in the middle, we'll save the messages. Okay, let me see what the thug shaker is. Oh no, I'm not gonna do that. No way. Why is it so dumb, this stupid chat settings? Why is it so big? Can I just do this part? Okay, I gotta figure it out later. Jesus. Have to figure it out later. Probably should have made an announcement. Last time it was definitely more people that showed up. Okay. Just waiting a bit for more people to show up and then we start, boys. I have no idea how to set up this chat. I'm just gonna try to figure it out, but I don't think I will now. So I'll probably have to do it later. And then so let's just remove it for now. Okay. So boys, how is your day going? What time is it at your place? Because I live in Canada. It's 10:30 right now for me. Thank you for the sub, Black Hit 'em Black. 12 p.m. Nice. Where are you from? Okay, more people joining. Let's start in 3 minutes. So, my time will be 10:30. Starting the. I don't know. You can't really say it's a count. So, starting to say MoistCr1tikal in 3 minutes. Do 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 do. Have any questions, boys, to me or anything like that? 2 minutes left. Yeah, I don't know why the chat doesn't work, because I've tried to put it on screen, but for some weird reason it just doesn't work. Okay, what if I just put it like this? Then I just move it in OBS. Is Canada a nice place to live in? I don't know. It's fine. Okay, yeah, I guess this will work. Planning to move there one day, either Canada or Australia. Well, I think I live in a pretty shitty province, so I don't think it's the best place. For some reason, it cuts out the names, but it's so weird. Why would it do that? Why would it do that? Okay, I don't know. It's gonna have to be something like this for now. For now. Later I'll try to figure something else out. Okay, so let's start. Yep. Let's go. Wait, so I'll put this a bit lower. Hello, YouTube. Yes, hello. Okay, so let's go. MoistCr1tikal, 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 MoistCr1tikal. Whew, 10%. MoistCr1tikal, 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 MoistCr1tikal. This is when it starts getting hard. MoistCr1tikal, 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 MoistCr1tikal. 400. MoistCr1tikal, 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 MoistCr1tikal. Yeah, the hat swings is helping. You have to have a rhythm, because otherwise you just, it gets hard to pronounce. MoistCr1tikal, 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 MoistCritical, 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 MoistCritical. Oh, that's not halfway, so it's only 25%, counting to 2,000 this time. MoistCritical, 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 Moistcritical. Moistcritical, 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 Moistcritical. Moistcritical, 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 Moistcritical. Moistcritical, 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 critical, most 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 critical, Jesus, most critical, 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 most critical. Damn, it's getting hard, man. Come on, we gotta get this sub 30 at least. Most critical, 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 most critical. Most critical, 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 most critical. Most critical, 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 most critical. Most critical, 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 most critical. I mean, we are on pace. Most critical, 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 most critical. Oh my God, thank you so much for the tip. Thank you very much, man. Most critical, 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 most critical. Most critical, most critical, most critical, most critical, most critical, most critical, most critical. Most critical, 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 most critical. Oh my God, thank you so much, most critical. Is that a real Charlie? Thank you very much. I'll read the text later after I finish this. Most critical, 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 most critical. Okay, we are at 1,000, halfway through. So if we do the same pace, it should be 22, 23 minutes. It's getting harder, man, though. It's getting harder. He's streaming on Twitch right now. We should alert him. Go, guys! Most critical, 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 most critical. Most critical, 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 most critical. Most critical, 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 most critical. Come on. Sub 25, I have to do it. Most critical, 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 most critical. Thank you so much for the sub. Most critical, most critical, most critical. My Dupam 777. Most critical, 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 most critical. Most critical, 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 most critical. Most critical, 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 most critical. Most critical, 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 most critical. We need the moisture. Most critical, 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 most critical. Most critical, 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 most critical. Most critical, 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 most critical. Okay. Jesus. I didn't bring water with me. It's the only thing I have. Come on, 600 left. Most critical, 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 most critical. MoistCr1tikal, 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 critical, most 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 critical. Most critical, 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 most critical. Most critical, 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 most critical. Most critical, 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 most critical. Yeah, 2000. Most critical, 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 most critical. Most critical, 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 most critical. Jesus. Most critical, 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 most critical. Build different. That's going to do 10k. It's probably going to be 5k and then 10k. Most critical, 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 most. Oh my god, my computer lagged. Thank you for the tip, Tate. My computer lagged, I guess, because of the tip. Or something. I don't know what happened. Is everything fine? Wait, let me reload the page. Okay, everything's fine, I think. Because of the tip, my stream crashed or something. I know what happened. Most critical, 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 most critical. Yeah, good reason to lag. Thank you very much for the tip. Most critical, 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 most critical. Most critical, 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 most critical. MoistCr1tikal, 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 yeah, it's gonna be sub 25. MoistCr1tikal, 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 MoistCritical, 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 and MoistCritical sub 23. Let's go. Jesus. The time I was the second time I was doing the 1,000, when I was counting up to 1,000, then it was so hard for me to say MoistCritical. Now it's a lot easier. Getting better, boys. Improve yourself in any way in your life. Do you happen to have a Discord? I will make a Discord specifically to this channel. I'm really bad at it, so I have to look up some like YouTube guides to do that. Okay, let me check up the donations, because maybe some people wrote something in them. Okay, give me a second. Practice makes perfect. Exactly. Wait. Okay, so I had a donation from Anonymous. He said nice. Thank you. Donation from MoistCritical. He said MoistCritical. MoistCritical indeed. Charlie didn't see our chat. I mean, I didn't expect Charlie to join. Thank you for the subscription, Frog Storms. And I had another $3 donation from Tate. He said, watch Breaking Bad. It's like reaction content. This channel is about counting. I mean, I can say Breaking Bad a lot of times, but I don't think I'll watch it. Yet I might, if actually I haven't watched it. Like, I never watched Breaking Bad. There were about 200 other people talking about Logan Paul. We tried every few chats, and Charlie's chat with us was us. So it was a big doubt he would see. Yeah, I mean, I don't expect to. Thank you guys for trying. Thank you guys. Yeah, so I'll probably stream tomorrow. I don't know what I'll do tomorrow. So yesterday I did counting to 1,000, and tomorrow I don't know. Should I do counting to 2,000 or should I do Charlie 5,000? I'm not too sure. One day he shall see. I might donate, like I might send some money and say check out, because I think that would be a big boost for the channel if he actually sees my channel. Well, yeah. Logan Paul, who the counting going on here is legendary. Yep. daily, what inspired you to start this channel? The whole thing has been very interesting. I explained it yesterday, but I can say it again. Well, I don't know. I just saw a Mr. Beast video counting to 100,000, and I thought, why have I never seen a channel counting to like smaller numbers? That would be funny. And then I was like, why not only count, but also say some like either YouTuber or streamer names to get attention and stuff. So that I just started doing it. The first day I recorded like 9 videos or 12 videos. I uploaded 3, so saying Mr. Beast 1 time, 2 times, and 5 times. I uploaded them. I forgot about those videos for 2 days, didn't even look at the channel. Then I came back, I had 13 subscribers and like 400 views in total. And I was like shocked, so I uploaded 3 more videos, went to bed, woke up, I had 60 subscribers and like more than 1,000 views on all the videos, and I was like, oh my god, that's insane. And I uploaded the MoistCr1tikal videos, which are my most popular videos on the channel. There's one of them is almost at 10k now, and it got like 5,000 views in one day, like 3 of them. And I was so shocked. I was getting like, I think at that day I got like 300 subscribers, and that was such a nice feeling, because I've been doing YouTube for a long time, since I was like 12. I was doing like Minecraft Let's Plays and stuff like that in Ukrainian language, because I'm Ukrainian, so back in Ukraine I did that. And when I moved here I did some like content in Ukrainian too, but yeah, this is actually my first channel that I did in English. This channel is great and can't wait to see MoistCr1tikal 1 million times. Well, I might do it. Depends on how everything goes. Channel's crazy in the algorithm. Yeah, the algorithm for some reason loves my channel. Recommends my videos a lot. I've been here since saying it 5 times. Nice. So that's like almost like since the beginning. Okay guys, I think I'm gonna end the stream now. Thank you so much for tuning in. I don't really have anything else to say. Eating thousands of Big Macs when I'm fat anyway, man. I can't do that. I've gotta lose some weight. I need to do counting how much pounds I lost in a week or in a couple months. Yeah, thank you guys for tuning in. We're gonna stream tomorrow, probably around the same time. So yeah, I'm gonna assume the algorithm loves the constant uploads, so hits channel should just keep growing. Yeah, I guess the part of it is that, yeah, because a lot of my videos don't get recommended, and then some of them do, and when they do, I get upwards to like 3,000 to 5,000 views. Okay, thank you guys so much. Bye. Have a good night. I don't know if it's night at your place, but mine it is. It's like 11 p.m. So